I'm Erin. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome for the first time if you're new here. Today I'm going to be talking about my experience reading Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This was my first foray into the romantasy category and the sort of new adult category. And I think the way I came by discovering this book is slightly unconventional. I've learned since reading it that it was a very popular, or is a very popular book on BookTok. I don't have TikTok. I downloaded it once for about 5 minutes, found it really uncompelling, and immediately deleted the app. So I'm not really in touch with the books that are popular on TikTok or BookTok. And I actually found this book by searching through books that were popular in my library's database. And when I came across this one, I saw that there were over 600 people in line waiting to read a copy. And I thought, why is this book so popular? What's going on? It wasn't a new release at the time. It had been out for several months and there were still that many people in line. So I ended up buying a copy of the book online solely because I was curious about why it was so popular, why there were that many people in line for a book. Normally, through my library, I can see how many people are in line waiting to read a book that's a new release or another release. And most of the time, I don't see more than 10 to 20, maybe 30 people in line to read a book. So seeing that many in line was unusual. And I wanted to know what it was about this book that was drawing people in so much. So when my copy arrived, I opened the box, opened up the book, read the disclaimer in the front that tells you that it's going to contain violence and all these things, and then read the first page or two, and I just thought, I don't know if I actually am like into this. I don't know if I want to read it. It's not a category I normally reach for. And I ended up returning the book. I also thought, I don't know if this is a book that I want to own. Maybe I'll just put my name on the list for the library copy, and when it becomes available, I'll read the library one. So I returned the book, put my name on the wait list for the library copy, and moved on. But a month later, at least, I looked it up again, and there were over 700 people waiting for it on my library's wait list. And I just thought, you know what, I'm really curious about why this book is gripping people so much. So I ended up starting to look for a copy of it that I could buy in stores so I could see it for myself first. I noticed that the copy that I had bought online had some issues, and a lot of people who were reviewing the book and the new one, Iron Flame, were saying that there were print quality issues. And so I decided that I really just wanted to be able to see the copy I was buying before picking it up so that I could make sure I had one that was in good condition, didn't have any problems with it. So I actually visited several stores, and it took me several weeks to find a copy that didn't have issues. One of the issues that I was coming across a lot personally was that the dust jacket was cut too short, so it didn't actually cover the book block, and mine even is still a little bit too short, but it's not as drastic as I had been seeing. I've been seeing somewhere it's like at least a 1/4 inch too short, and so the black book spine actually sticks out to the end. And I was noticing that issue on my copies of Iron Flame as well. So I waited to find copies that were in condition I wanted to pay for, and I ended up finding some at Target. So I picked this up and immediately started reading it, and I was really surprised by this book. It has a lot of things in it that I normally really hate in books, or am not drawn to in books. I don't like reading about violence, and I don't really love action movies or action scenes. And I had never read anything with dragons in it that I can remember, and I would never have thought I would like something that has dragons in it, or something set at a war college. It was something I normally would not have reached for, would not have thought I would have liked. But when I actually gave this book a chance and read it, it kept me up until 2 a.m. multiple days reading, and I could not put it down. The story is so engrossing and thrilling and interesting. I felt like there were some issues with it, but they weren't huge problems for me because the story was so engaging and I just kept wanting to read it. The world building felt immersive, and it felt like it was just drawing me into the story, even though there were elements of the story that I normally would find really off-putting. And there were a couple of sections where I kind of skimmed a little bit, But overall, I just found that the story was really appealing and I liked the dragons. I came away thinking that the dragons were my favorite characters and I wanted to read more books with dragons in them, and I actually went to the bookstore and bought more books that have dragons in them, which is something I never could have imagined that I would say before reading this book. Now, some criticism that I have heard about this book is that it's very derivative in that it kind of pulls elements of stories from other authors and other books who've written books that have the same kind of theme or setting or dragons or characters, and it feels to some readers like it's just a mashup of elements from other authors' stories, and I think that's an important and fair criticism. I haven't read any of those stories, so I was coming across all of these story elements for the first time, and as a person just getting into this genre, I found it really fun and interesting and gripping. So I ended up really enjoying this. I was sitting at giving it a 4-star review on Goodreads right up until the end. And then the end is a major cliffhanger, and I sometimes have problems with cliffhangers in books. I think they can be done really well. So if an author is writing a series and they have an overall series arc, but then each book has its own plot arc within it that wraps up at the end of each book. You see that in books like Harry Potter, where there's an overarching series plot that keeps going, but each book has its own plot that does wrap up by the end of the book. This book is part of a series. It's going to be presumably a 5-book series. This is the first one. And the thing I didn't like about it is that it ends on a cliffhanger without any kind of like single book plot wrapping up. And so it ends up feeling more like volume 1 of a story than book 1 in a series, if that makes sense. And so because of that, I found the ending really unsatisfying because nothing really wraps up. We just end at the end of a TV show almost episode that wants you to tune in next week to see the rest of the story. But it wasn't marketed as volume 1 of 5. It's marketed as book 1 of 5 in a series. And I think authors run some risk when they do that, because if you write an ending that is a complete cliffhanger, to me, as the reader, it leaves me wondering if you can write good endings at all. Or if you have to just end right there in order to keep us interested enough for the next book, if that makes sense. So I felt like it weakened it as its own book a little bit to end on a complete cliffhanger instead of wrapping up something central to the plot of this book. But I can also understand that this is just book 1 in a series, and maybe this author has just chosen to carry her series plot through all 5 stories, all 5 books in a different way than maybe I'm just used to seeing. But because she did that, and I didn't particularly like the way she did it, I've been thinking about rating this at 3.5 stars because of that. And I don't know, I actually finished reading it several days ago, but I haven't put a rating on Goodreads yet, just because I really want to give it 4 stars, but I really didn't like the total complete cliffhanger there. And I think that if Iron Flame wasn't out already, I would have been even more frustrated. So I think, critically speaking, that it's a 3.5 star book for me personally, but that I enjoyed the story enough that I'm thinking about rounding it up to a 4. Now, I have already picked up Iron Flame. I'm about, I don't know, maybe not quite 20% of the way through it. This one, I have noticed that the production quality isn't as good as I would like. The pages look like they've been cut really roughly, like by a dull blade or something. And so there's just kind of like some shedding, some paper dust that comes off, and they're not quite, I don't know, it's just not quite the quality that I'm used to seeing in a book that sells for $30. Now this one I'm finding so far that it's not grabbing me as much as this one did. And maybe that's because this one was new. And so maybe this one was just triggering a lot more like serotonin and dopamine in my brain that kept pulling me back in. because it was newer, but this one hasn't been pulling me in as much. So I'm going through this one more slowly, and I'm finding that I'm even reaching for books instead of this one. Speaking of, I'm reading a book right now called The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. It's a classic. It's a huge tome, over 1,200 pages in the edition I'm reading, and I've been picking that up over this one because that one is so gripping and just so well written, and I am just loving it. So if you are wanting to jump into a story that will just grab you, don't be intimidated by the length of that one or that it's a classic. It's so good. I'm about 220 pages in to that one right now, and it is so gripping. I'm loving reading it. I can't believe I waited so long to read it. So not in the same category at all, but the story is really good. Anyway, I'll let you know what I think about this one when I finish reading it. For now, those are my thoughts on Fourth Wing. I'd love to hear what you think about it. I know a lot of people are just loving it and raving about it, and other people are really critical of it. I can see why people are critical of it, but I also just really enjoyed the story. So anyway, that's my first jump into this world of fantasy and romantasy and sort of new adult, I guess. Feel free to leave recommendations for books that you think I might enjoy in that category. I know that ACOTAR by Sarah J. Maas is a really popular series, and Throne of Glass is a really popular series, and I've never read either of those. So I've actually picked up the first book in each of those series, and I'm planning on reading those to see if they pull me in to those series and make me want to buy the rest of the books in them. And I've also picked up some other like first books in series, but I'm actively looking for recommendations in those areas. So feel free to tell me which ones you have loved in the comments below. If you're still here, thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next video.